really wanted us to focus on institution building, right? Because that's what we represent in our work as entrepreneurs, providing service, keeping the message afloat. So if you, in the current position that you are now in 2011, and you go back to 20 years to see where you perhaps first entered hip-hop, what would you say is the biggest difference? Or you might substitute the word difference with frustration, with the journey that has been a part of your life in trying to sustain what you do via hip-hop. Matt, I'm going to start with you.
I'm like all over the place when it comes to that, because obviously the commercial success of hip-hop benefited a lot of us as professionals, those who are providing service to people that worked in the industry. As artists and producers and writers in hip-hop became more and more successful, you know, we became more and more successful because they were making more money. I think, you know, and people will argue and debate this, but one of the frustrations I have is just, and it may be, you know, and I try not to sound like my mother or my father, but it's just, and it may be, you know, the fact of just getting older, but I struggle with the quality and the content that kind of bothers me now, and like, you know, to the point where like I could be representing somebody that I really dislike, or I really don't, you know, or I really don't really respect, you know, musically, well, not, I should say, not dislike, but, well, it can be disliked. I don't really think that they're as talented, or, you know, but, you know, it's business, it's work, or just music, you know, or just as an individual, you don't dislike them. But I just think because of with success, you know, and now the industry is just, now that the industry is on a down, you know, the curve went up and now it's on a down, and now to see so much contraction and downsizing, and now, you know, when you have black music departments, and now the fact that there are no black music departments, and you may have a black senior executive at a label, that's kind of like frustrating to me. And that's not to say that there aren't white or other executives of other ethnicities that aren't qualified to be, you know, to be executives in that industry. But it's just something that, from where I came and where I grew up with, that's just something that I find, you know, some frustration with now, the current state of the industry now.
Okay. Dru Ha, I'm going to pitch the same question to you.
Well, 20 years ago, I was still in school.
So were we.
Yeah. Not far. I think, you know, for me, the frustration today is obviously one that's is the plus and the minus is the technology and the way everything's going on. And you know, someone asked me a question earlier outside, we're doing an interview, and I was describing and saying that the downloading that's going on right now is you hear it all the time, and you hear that the music industry is in decline. It's real. This is not global warming, like we're not sure. You know, like, was it warmer this winter? Like, you know, and you know that you obviously understand that global warming is real, but it may not be realized to where it really affects you or your children or your grandkids until 100 years from now. With this, where we're living through it, and it's a complete problem right now that you know, music sales just continue to decrease, and there's no other way to point it but that kids are illegally downloading the music. And while the internet wasn't around when I first started, which wasn't about 16, 17 years ago, I would do my work then out of notebooks, and I would, you know, off of Rolodexes. That's how I looked people up and got their card and put it in. I remember, you know, the transition of obviously the technology really becoming a friend to us as an independent label, but it's also probably one of our biggest enemies as well, is because the downloading is just really hurting the business. And like I said, it's not just us sitting here saying it. It's across all genres. I don't care if you're a major label artist, a country singer, or a hip hop artist. It's real. People think that it's okay to just take music
for free.
For free.
Ceeon, what about you?
From my perspective, I don't know, kind of like Matt, really a little all over the place with it. And forgive me if I get a little bit too technical, if there isn't anyone in here interested or practices public relations or media, but what's changed and what's frustrating to me is I don't see the strategy and the discipline from communications and PR professionals. Your responsibility isn't just to put out a press release and make sure that your artist takes good pictures. Your responsibility is that person, because we're talking about artists, we're talking about somebody's God-given talent. It's raw talent. You can study it, can't buy it, it's them. Okay? So your responsibility is to protect that artist. You also come to the table, just like in a family, everybody brings a different talent. I can't bring the legal talent. That's what Matt does. But I understand in communications that everything that you do and everything that you say can make or break your career, regardless of how good your talent is. So I have a responsibility, especially if I'm an accredited public relations professional, to make sure my client understands that. To make sure that the most important thing, as Raz said today, is that artist. And everybody who surrounds that artist. And I'll even transition over into politics. I've worked for mayors, I've worked for congresspeople. Everything's about the politician. And someone told me a long time ago, if you don't believe in the politician, don't take the job. If you don't believe in the artist and the artist's message, don't take the job. Okay? Your responsibility is to make sure everything that they do and everything that they say is in line with who they are, their art, their craft. That's your responsibility. So my frustration now is I'm seeing very, very talented people, very talented men and women. And I have to rewind and say this was and still is and has always been our passion behind the cultural initiative. And as Raz said, other than Matt and probably a few others, I'm not in the industry, many of us aren't. Our main driving force was to make sure that this group of talented hip-hop artists could be protected and that they knew from going to Matt's panel, which became one of the most popular. You had people signing up for it. It was booked up 3 months before the conference on how to negotiate a contract. I think that panel started off being an hour and it turned into 2. But I'm giving that example to say the responsibility is to make sure that this artist, that's their art. But when they walk into the business of the entertainment industry, you have to be their eyes and ears. So when I'm learning and I'm hearing about these artists and everything I'm hearing about is either, what's on Facebook or what they're tweeting that day, and it's nothing, they're all over the place. They're all over the place. They're all over the place. And most times, their music-wise are being all over the place. But the lawyer, the PR person, the manager, all of those people have a specific role to make sure that that person, A, can practice their craft without interruption and without a distraction, and to make sure that they sell, that they meet their bottom line so that they are taken care of. That's your job. So that means, and I go back to Public Enemy, perfect example for me. Their message, their music, everything they said and everything they did off stage matched what was on stage. That's a strategic conversation. And I don't see that enough from my peers in the industry. And, whether we like it or not, and I'll go back to my first example about saying our message unfiltered. Journalism is very, very busy. Your print reporters maybe have 30 minutes to talk to you when you're giving your pitch. They have an editor, and that editor has an editor, and the bottom line is you got to make sure you sell that publication. So you have to make sure that you capture their attention and you get your principals' information out there. Because if you don't, they're going to do it for you. Because there's so much other technology out there that they'll wind up creating your artist for you. And your artist is going to wind up chasing an image that they didn't even intend to create. That's when it's out of control and all over the place. And my frustration is I see a lot of talented artists not being protected the